USC at 2-0. Your thoughts about the first two wins? Again, the sweep of the two Arizona schools, not scoring a ton of points until the last 5 minutes of each game, but getting the job done with two touchdown drives in each game in the last 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, it's, a win is a win. USC gets to say that. A late comeback is always, having the skill to pull that off is always a good thing. But aside from that, these have not been good enough performances for USC. And, the Arizona game, you could look at it, and the Arizona State game, I'm sorry, you could look at it, opening week jitters. ASU is a dark horse kind of team. Herm Edwards has them on the way up. So a tight game there, you just shrug and you move on. Week 2 against Arizona is not a good team. They are not an up-and-coming team. They are a team that Kevin Sumlin is on the chopping block. His seat is almost as hot as Clay Helton's is. And that there's no good reason that USC shouldn't have run away with that game, except that USC failed to execute. They made key mistakes, and they are falling into the same issues that USC has had over the last couple of years, which shows that not a lot has changed with a defensive coaching staff change, with year 2 in the offensive system. And the buck has to come back to Clay Helton, and really it's the weirdest 2-0 that I've ever experienced with USC, where it hasn't slowed down at all any of the talk. In fact, it's probably sped up some of the talk about whether or not USC should make a coaching change.
Yeah, 11-point favorite against Arizona State in what might be the best opponent in the regular season on paper. They skate by after being down by 13 points late. And then again against Arizona, I was surprised. I watched like the last half of the fourth quarter, surprised to check in and see them down. And of course, they came back and got it done. They did run the ball well with Stepp and with Carr.
Yeah, that's the weird thing is USC has incredible talent at quarterback, at wide receiver, and at running back. We don't talk about those guys quite as much, but Stepp and Carr are very good running backs. It's frustrating to watch them run, though, because so often USC's offensive line isn't giving them support, and so often they're put in running situations that they can't possibly succeed in. So, if you caught the end of that game, you caught USC at its best. But the first 3 quarters was a whole lot of USC being very, very up and down. And one of the frustrations about that is the tendency for USC to do everything right and look beautiful, and then on the very next play, everything falls apart and it gets blown up. And USC's running game is exactly a microcosm of that, where Carr and Stepp, if you give them room, they're going to go, and they're going to look good doing it. And they're going to power through tackles if they have to. But too often they're met in the backfield. Too often it's 3rd and short, and USC can't out-physical the opponent up front, and it results in failed third down conversions. It results in backs getting hit in the backfield. So USC is in this weird situation where they're running the ball well while also running the ball poorly. And so I'd say I struggle to put it all together and explain it really well. But that's the situation that USC is in that makes it so hard to evaluate this team, because there's equal parts like, wow, that was really good, and equal parts, wow, that's really not good enough.
Well, it's been a baffling team for quite some time. We've got Alicia De Artola on the line from Reign of Troy. Please check out her work. She joins us periodically and does an outstanding job for us. So take the deep dive over on Reign of Troy. USC taking on Utah. The defense in there are such amazing players, especially in the secondary in spots. You put it all together. They've been better, I think, these first 2 games than most of last season, but not great.
No, not great. I agree with you that they've been improved in that. I think that the players look more engaged, that they are, the mistakes are not quite as crushing as they were last year, but there are still some big issues that USC has, and it's for me, it really all revolves around the linebackers. USC doesn't really have the linebackers that they need at inside linebacker to have this defense succeed, because the idea is supposed to be that you have your defensive line that is providing a foundation, that is occupying blocks, and then your linebackers come up and make plays. And USC's linebackers just aren't coming up and making the plays unless their name is, Drake Jackson. And Drake Jackson's making plenty of plays. He had 2 sacks in the second half against Arizona, and USC missed him in the first half when he had to go back to the locker room to get an IV. So the issue is really that Palaie Gaoteote hasn't taken the step forward that USC needs him to. His partner at inside linebacker, Raylan Goforth, I see him trying very hard, but bad angles are bad angles, and missed tackles are missed tackles, and you have a problem when Gaoteote goes out with a concussion or concussion protocol, as it were, and they bring in Raymond Scott, who was up until a couple weeks ago a safety who was absolutely buried on the depth chart, and they convert him back to linebacker. He had come out of high school as a linebacker, and he comes in and he's USC's best linebacker. And credit to him for playing all right, but like the truth is, all he did was play all right, and it was an improvement on what USC had been throwing out there. So my main concern at this point is the tackling angles that USC is taking, but really, even if everything got cleaned up in that regard, I worry that USC's linebackers are not up to par at this point, and Todd Orlando really needs them to be up to par in order for this defense to work.
Now they play Utah back-to-back. I should say Utah's the back-to-back division champions. Utah finally getting on the field, hopefully, as of this recording. And the Utes, of course, 8-1 last year in the Pac-12, and the one loss to USC, in which the Trojans wide receivers pretty much abused their secondary, which was one of the best in the Pac-12. They're usually stout on defense, but they've had so much attrition on that side of the ball. They're almost, in a sense, the big narrative, Alicia, the anti-USC. They play above their recruiting ranking. They've got super stability. They're not flashy. They're not sexy. Kyle Whittingham's been there for 16 years. He's probably the last guy that would be on a hot seat. His seat's ice cold because he's done such a great job there. Jake Bentley, most likely the starting quarterback. That's what I would expect out of South Carolina, although they've got Cameron Rising, the hotshot transfer out of Texas. So some thoughts were that Arizona State would be the main challenger. Maybe Utah continues to be that team. Your thoughts about the Utes?
Well, it's so hard to know because we don't know many of the players that are going to be out there. But like you said, we do know Kyle Whittingham, and that is my perspective coming into this game, is that, yes, they are going to be breaking in a bunch of new faces, but this is still a Kyle Whittingham coach team. And we know what that looks like. We know that they will be tough in the trenches. We know that they will be capable of being more physical than anybody that they play, particularly USC. And so that is my main concern. I think that if USC had come out in the first 2 weeks and looked stronger, I would come into this game more confident, because we don't know what Utah has in terms of their personnel. Having seen USC in the first 2 weeks struggle against someone like Arizona, who doesn't have great talent and doesn't have an elite defensive coordinator and doesn't have all of the ability that a Utah squad, even a rebuilding one, would have, and see them struggle like that against that team, I am now firmly in the belief that Utah can win this game, short of they're coming out of their COVID protocols and they have so much uncertainty, and this is their first game, and maybe they're going to be going through some first game jitters and all of that kind of stuff. That could get in the way of them. But man to man, unit to unit, I worry about USC in this game, because I think in order to beat Utah in Salt Lake City, you have to be disciplined, you have to be physical, and that's not what USC has been in any way, shape, or form in the first 2 weeks. So color me concerned for this one.
Folks, please like the videos, comment, share the videos out on social media, subscribe right here to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We talk it up every day. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. That's our mission. So please lock it in. Hit that bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live, which is multiple times per day. So despite the struggles against the two Arizona teams and now facing maybe the revised best challenge of the season before the possible Pac-12 championship game, despite all those struggles, USC continues to be favored every game and will be most likely. So they could make it through this season undefeated, at least to a Pac-12 championship game showdown in which they will need to be much improved to take on what we've seen out of Oregon, most likely emerging from the north. So this would have to be tempered. But of course, the coaches need to take it game by game. But we're the media. We can speculate. A USC team that's undefeated that continues to scrape by what's going to be an unimpressive schedule will be an interesting dilemma for the College Football Playoff Selection Committee.
I don't think it should be. I think if the selection committee is what it's supposed to be, which is an arbiter of watching each game, understanding what each team is, and how competitive each team can be, unless something drastically changes over these next 4 weeks, I think the College Football Playoff Committee will watch USC and recognize they have no business being in the playoff. And that may depend on what's going on elsewhere in the country. Everybody else might fall flat on their face in this last 4 weeks, and maybe USC will have a case by default because everyone else has losses that USC at least gets to say they know how to win. But if you want to talk about USC being in the class of Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State or any of those teams, frankly, I don't think USC fans want to see USC play in those games. I mean, there was talk this week that if Utah is unable to play, then Notre Dame has an open week, and potentially, what if USC and Notre Dame, plugged in that rivalry? I don't think there's any chance of that happening either way. But like, my first reaction to that, I know the reaction of a lot of USC fans was, no one wants to see that beat down. No one wants to see that embarrassment, because that's the way that USC is playing right now. So USC could turn it around and really start to get on a roll late in the season. They've done that before, and that might change my view on that. But if you're talking about a USC team that's 6-0 or 7-0, where they played about the same as they've played and continue to play down to opponents and just, miracle their way to wins because Keaton Slovis is so good in the fourth quarter, then I would lose a lot of faith in the College Football Playoff Committee if they looked at that and thought that's a playoff caliber team.
Certainly, UCLA and Colorado and Cal pulled together a game in less than 48 hours. I know that with the 2 open weeks, because of the COVID situation, there was hypothetical talk that meant absolutely nothing about Ohio State and Alabama getting together for like a dream matchup last week. But that would be USC, Notre Dame. Hey, I just love watching great games, so I would want to see it. Notre Dame, I don't think would want to risk it. Not that they're afraid of USC, but they've got no reason to add another tough game onto their schedule. Alicia De Artola, please check out her work on Reign of Troy. There it is. She does a great job coming on here and breaking down USC for us. Alicia, enjoy the game, and appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see how it goes this weekend. It'll be interesting.